All right, everybody. Thank you for joining us on the Brass Tax Business Podcast. Today, I am thrilled to have Wade Tetsuka on the podcast. Wade, thank you so much for being on.
Happy to be here, Keith.
Yes, thank you. So, really excited to talk to you, Wade. You've got a tremendous amount of business experience. So, just for our viewers, so everybody knows, a little introduction on Wade. Wade is a seasoned CPA with over 20 years of financial and business management expertise. He's the founder of U.S. Transactions Corp. Wade combines his vast experience, including leadership in roles such as with Ernst& Young, PricewaterhouseCoopers, and Wade helps to drive innovation and success in the government contracting arenas as well as the B2B enterprises. Wade is an alumni of Wharton School of Business. He's a dedicated community leader. In 2006, he had organized Loudoun Education Foundation's annual Golf Classic, which I'm excited to touch upon. Wade helped to raise $100,000 annually to support student programs here in Loudoun County. His tireless volunteer work and past presidency of the foundation continue to inspire. Wade also has his wife, Natasha, and they both live here with their son in Loudoun County for the past 25 years. Their son, Thomas, attends VCU. Wade grew up in Los Angeles, graduated from the Wharton School of Business in Pennsylvania. Wade's favorite subject to speak on is leadership for entrepreneurs and small to medium businesses, which he calls How to Win to be a Category of One. So, again, Wade, welcome. Thank you so much for being on. I am so thrilled to have you on, Wade, because I love to learn more about you personally. So give all of our viewers just a little bit of background about yourself, how you got into the business arena and, what inspired this career that you've had for the last 20 years.
Well, thanks, Keith, and so honored to be on your podcast series. So I guess what inspired, I guess for many people, the path to where you end up is not always what you intended. I mean, I started my career as a CPA, as you mentioned in the introduction, and for a couple of very large public accounting firms. And I really thought that, well, my goal was really to kind of rise the corporate ladder in like kind of a Fortune 500 setting. And along the way, things don't always work out the way you think they are, or things are not always the way you envision that they would be, put it that way, right?
Sure, exactly. The cor the corporate ladder is not all it's cracked up to be, is what you're
That's
saying.
right. The corporate ladder is not all that it's cracked up to be, but it does remind me too, Keith. I mean, back in the day, look, I'm 60 years old. So back in the day, I mean, it was like you would work like 60 hours a week, and this is like what was kind of expected. I mean, mainly during what we called the busy season when we were doing audits, which would be around January to April time period. And obviously we had large Fortune 500 companies as clients at those CPA firms, but we'd work 60-hour weeks, and it was really expected. And you didn't really think anything of it. You had a lot of colleagues that were young professionals just out of college, like I was at the time. And so today, I mean, I don't think that's the culture today in corporations for the most part, and they don't expect that. And it's certainly a much better today than it was when I was growing up. But we didn't know any better. And honestly, we were having a lot of fun, but it's kind of crazy. Eventually, I left public accounting, went into the medical device industry. That's how I actually came to Loudoun County. I started a company called Wavelight. It's a laser company that does the LASIK procedure. It's still the best product out there for the LASIK procedure, actually, for
Wow.
corrective
Yeah.
surgery for vision. And I started the US operation. It's a German company. Right before they got their FDA approval, we established the company here in Loudoun County. And then about 3 years later, they were bought by a huge ophthalmology company called Alcon. And that basically ended was the end for me with that engagement. But we went from zero to like 12% market share in less than 3 years of all LASIK procedures in the United States once we opened the operation here in the US. So it was an exciting ride and interesting time. But after leaving that company, I got into the area of payments, credit card processing. So that's how I ended up in credit card processing, as you mentioned in the intro. It was a long way around to get
Yeah.
there.
Well, quite a transition from LASIK medical device to credit card processing.
Yes.
Wait, let's back up a little bit. Like, were you always kind of a business type, mindset? Did you grow up like was your mom and dad kind of did they get you into business? Like, what kind of was your initial interest going to the Wharton School of Business? What inspired that?
Yeah, I guess my dad was a career school teacher for Los Angeles public schools. So he taught middle school and did that for 30 years. So I grew up around education and public school education. So that was a big influence on me. But my dad said, "Oh, hey, wait, if you're interested in business," so he told me this when I was very young, like in high school. If you're interested in business, then here's the best business schools to go to, and Wharton was one of them. And I said, well, that would be on my top three list. So that's kind of what I aspired to. And from really the time I was a freshman in high school, I kind of had that vision that this is what I want to do. I want to be in business. I don't want to go into, I don't want to be a school teacher like my dad. My mom was a secretary for a company that later became AECom, which is, of course, the largest engineering firm in the country. But I wanted to go into business. And so from freshman year, like I was very, very laser focused on just how do I get there. And so I studied my ass off.
Yeah. Yeah. Good
You
for
can
you.
bleep that out if you want to.
That's totally okay.
Yeah.
It's funny because I have clients, that come in often with their high school kids or, whether they're athletes or they're interested in music and I always give them a lot, those kids that are very focused and they know, hey, this is what I want to do. I want to be a football player or I want to
Right.
be a musician or I want to be this. For me, I was not like that at all. I was I mean, I was an athlete, but I was all over the place. I really didn't know what I wanted to do until I was, in my mid to late 20s. So that's very impressive, Wade, being so young, at freshman in high school, you're what, 15, 16 years old. You just 100% knew you wanted to do business. That's great. Okay.
Yes. Yeah. So, but I kind of don't wish that, like the kind of rigor that I went through, like academically, I wouldn't wish that on anybody else. But that was just me. And back then, Keith, I mean, my mentality was like, it's like what you know is the most important thing. I mean, as I got older, I realized it's not just what you know, it's also who you know, right? Who
Yeah.
you know is just as important as what you know. So the whole thing around emotional intelligence is just as important, if not more important than academic intelligence or IQ, as they say.
And for our listeners, when you were in high school and you were laser focused and you were gaining a lot of that knowledge, what are just some of the types of things that you studied or, whether did they offer types of programs like that in your high school or were you just going outside of school and doing extracurricular stuff to learn more about business?
I guess I was going outside more. I mean, it was just a lot of AP courses that I was taking and taking dual enrollment type of credits with one of the local universities. So, but I would say there was nothing really business specific. There was nothing really business specific. It was all like just the prep courses. But I knew that it was, in my mind, it was like, how do I perform academically is going to be a major factor in determining if I get into a top school. So,
Great. All
yeah.
right. So you studied hard. You're laser focused on business. You got into the Wharton School of Business. How was it there during your time there at the Wharton School of Business?
So I continued my like laser focus on the academic element. I had a roommate that was also from Los Angeles. I grew up in a very, very middle class neighborhood. He grew up in a very rich neighborhood. There were a lot of rich kids that went to Wharton. Like over the summer when I would go back home, we would get together because we both were in Los Angeles, in the Los Angeles area. And so I'd go to his house and, he'd have a tennis court in his backyard, and a swimming pool, that type of thing.
Yeah.
Nothing like what I grew up with. But anyway, I kind of went off on a tangent. But what did I do? So at Ward, oh, and I wanted to say also, like he'd have these pictures from, Auto Week magazine, so all of the most expensive cars, like pulled from the magazine, and they'd be up on the wall in the
Yeah.
room and everything, in the dorm room. Anyway, but my experience at Wharton, I continued my real like academic. laser focus, as you would say. And I didn't really do that much outside of the academic part. Um, I wasn't really that involved in kind of networking with people, which goes back to what I was saying earlier. I realize now that if I were to do it all over again, I would focus more on the social element of that experience, which I did not do when I was there.
And why do you feel obviously, hindsight's always 2020, but being surrounded by, those wealthy kids in school, did that change your mindset a little bit? Just surrounding, even if it was your roommate, maybe you didn't socialize with them a lot, but being around those kids, did they change your mindset, or were you just kind of focused on academics and you don't feel like it affected you at all?
Yeah, I don't, maybe it's in some unconscious way, subconscious way, it affected me, but it didn't really change what I was out, what I was trying to accomplish. A friend of mine, he did say I was kind of on a path where I wanted to go into some type of finance area. Like a lot of kids were going into investment banking. I didn't want to do that, but I did want to do some type of finance related thing. I just didn't know what. And then a friend of mine said, why don't you think about going into accounting and more specifically public accounting, where if you don't really know exactly what it is you want to do or what industry you want to be in, that's a way to get exposure to like all the industries, all kinds of industries, because you're gonna be visiting a lot of different companies, and so that influenced my decision to become a CPA when I graduated. It gave me a credential. It gave me a good start, I would say, a good groundwork.
So you graduated from Wharton and then you went into becoming a CPA. How long were you a CPA before you started the working with the medical device industry?
I worked for 8 years in public accounting, Ernst& Young, and then Price Waterhouse. So I was recruited by Price Waterhouse in Germany. I worked for 4 years in San Francisco as a CPA, and then I went to Germany for 4 more years as a CPA with Price Waterhouse, also doing like audits of mainly Fortune 500 companies there, also IBM, Kodak. So that was actually very interesting. Both companies at that time, that was in the early, these were struggling, IBM and Kodak, but I could see that there was a very, very different culture to both organizations. And, both companies were both, like Wall Street darlings, right? Kodak and IBM, but we all know the story about what happened to Kodak. IBM is still a very successful company. But back then I could see that there was a major difference in the culture of both organizations, and I could see like how one. It made sense to me like how one survived and the other did not, because one was really kind of mired in the past, while the
Mm.
other was still focused on like setting standards. Like IBM was always about setting standards, even like within the people in the accounting department they're writing their own accounting standards. I mean, who does this? It's like, yeah,
So the culture at IBM was much different than Kodak, where they were, trying to really set the standards or look into the future versus
yes,
maybe the culture at Kodak was not as, I don't know, progressive. I don't even know if that's the right word to use, but
yeah, they were like kind of stuck in the past. They were always kind of talked about like, they like how things were like before,
well,
and
and your experience at Ernst& Young and PricewaterhouseCoopers working for these Fortune 500 companies, did that experience for those 8 years, did that have a big impact on when founded US Transaction Corp or not really?
I. I think it did. I mean, I haven't really thought about it that much, the way you've positioned the way you've asked the question, but the one thing that comes to mind, one of the people I worked with when I was in public accounting at Ernst& Young, I told you I was like very focused on like rising the corporate ladder. I still was at that time, but this associate, he came in, he was 2 years younger than me, but he was very focused on this entrepreneurial mindset. I mean, he would like whenever he would be going to visiting companies, he's always looking like how I could see he's always looking like how can I turn this into like or how do I take some of these ideas that I'm seeing and make a company out of it, or make a venture out of it. And he would start his own things like on the weekend, like a company that makes brownies or something, and he'd start. He finds a recipe and then starts testing it. We're living in San Francisco at the time. Goes to the wharf and starts offering these brownies to people. They were not laced with marijuana or anything like that. This was the old days. This was the old days. But I think somebody from the health department said, "Hey, you can't do this, right? You can't just go out and start like giving people samples of food in public.
Yeah, yeah,
It
yeah.
doesn't work." But just he was always like trying different things, and it made me. It really opened my eyes to like an entrepreneurial mindset and a different way of thinking. So surprisingly, that didn't happen at Wharton. It happened after I was started working. But
Okay. So you definitely got a little taste of the entrepreneurial spirit. I know you mentioned the 60-hour work weeks and climbing the corporate ladder. Was there anything else about the corporate environment that you did enjoy or you didn't enjoy that kind of really motivated you to kind of go out on your own and start US Transaction Corp?
I guess that with the corporate environment, the one is the uncertainty. I guess in the olden days there was this perception that there's job security with corporate America, right? But especially large corporations, but there's really not. It's probably even less secure than working for for somebody like Integrative Chiropractic or any small medium-sized business around here that where the owner is heavily involved in the business and everything. I think there's a lot more security there than there is
Do you think that
working.
do you think that's true to this day and age, or do you think that's more, corporate America, 20 years ago versus today? Because was it just very cutthroat back then, or you just never knew when you were going to get let go?
No,
What was the kind of culture?
well, I mean, that was kind of the beginning. The 90s was kind of the beginning of that culture, I think, where it's just, viewed as head count and a person is just a number, right? It's just a head count. And
Hmm.
the large corporations just have to bring the head count down to a certain number or whatever, and that's it. So, but yeah, that was certainly a stress factor that made me think, hey, this is not, if I wanted to really be able to create a business with a culture that I define, as a founder, president, founder, CEO, whatever, just like you do with integrative chiropractic, you have to start your own business. That's when the opportunity came to me in the payments industry, even though it has nothing to do with the medical industry. Um, it kind of ties in with my finance background because we deal a lot with finance people all the time. And that's kind of where it came in.
So after you were at PricewaterhouseCoopers, is that when you went to do the medical device where you guys
Yes.
developed that technology, which is now known as LASIK, which everyone knows about LASIK now?
Yeah, actually, well, I left Price Waterhouse, went into the medical device industry with another company, with a different company,
Okay.
and it was in radiology and urology. And they transferred me to the U.S. So that's how I got back to the U.S.
Okay. And you said you guys had some pretty rapid growth in 3 years. What do you think precipitated that growth with the medical device, LASIK company?
We had the best technology. We had the best technology by far. And the outcomes that people were having with the laser, that with the wavelength laser, were significantly better than outcomes, or let's put it more predictable on the
Hmm.
outcomes and reliable than the other lasers, which had been on the market for a longer period of time. So we had the advantage of being a newer technology. And as you
Okay.
know, with newer technology, I mean, I guess you kind of see it a lot since you're in the medical industry also, right? I mean,
Yeah.
you kind of have to keep up with something that comes out that's new, has some innovations in it that are a step up from what a previous generation was.
Absolutely. So that company had rapid growth. And what were you doing for them, Wade? Were you a CPA, kind of in the CPA realm for that company as well, or was it more like a finance background?
So I was the general manager for the US, and so I started their US operation. So we grew it to 55 people. That included like 4 salespeople, about 10 to 12 service technicians that covered the entire US. And because these were lasers that were being sold for anywhere from like 250,000 to $500,000 each. So it was a huge investment
Yeah. Okay.
for the surgeons. But
And so after you said you got bought out by a very large company after you were there, and then is that when you went to found U.S. Transaction Corp after that?
yes, so after Alcon bought Wavelight, that was also the end of the line for me because Alcon is a huge multi-billion dollar company, so they're not going to have redundant positions. So they just folded that into their existing refractive surgery practice. And then somebody that I knew from the Wharton Alumni Association, she said, Wade, why don't you get into this is completely different, but why don't you get into the payments industry? It's she had a company based in Rockville, Maryland. So I joined her company and she kind of taught me the business. And then later she had was getting ready to sell the company and was going kind of a different direction than I was going as far as the client base that we were going after. So then I decided I'll just start my own company.
What was that? What was that transition like for you, Wade, going from working for somebody else to starting your
Actually, it was pretty easy, and luckily because I had already clients that were in the pipeline for me or prospects that were in the pipeline as soon as I started US Transactions Corp. I had clients that I could bring on board right away. So the transition was actually pretty easy from that regard.
running? Since you had the experience running the medical device company, you had some experience in that arena already. But I also know that you guys have like a 90%, client retention rate, over the last decade. What do you feel like is the key to building such, long-term relationships with your clients and such high retention?
Yeah, so I have clients. One of my largest clients is still one of the first ones that I got back when I started the company back in 2009. They're still clients of ours. So the key is customer service, and I know this is a cliche, but
No.
in the payments industry, Keith, it's really bad. I mean, the service is really bad. I mean, so for credit card processing service, I mean, you guys probably accept Visa, MasterCard, and American Express and all that. So if you have a question about something or you have a transaction from a customer that didn't go through or something like that, you call someone wants help. So you call a 1-800 number and you get a different person every time. A lot of times the person that you get doesn't obviously they don't know who you are. They've
Yeah.
never talked to you ever before probably. So they don't even know your business and then they may not even give you a good answer. And so, I always like to say, in general, with 800 numbers customer service, if you don't get the right answer the first time, just call them back another time until you get the right answer. Because after two or three times, you might actually get the answer that you're looking for, right? Because sometimes whoever was the customer service person is not very experienced. They don't understand. So anyway, with our clients, we give a single point of contact to every one of our clients. So they're not calling a 1-800 number. They call, Michaela, they call Rick, they call, in some cases, me, but they have a single point of contact to reach out to. And when they reach out to us, we know who they are, we know their business, and we're going to get back to them right away, and we're going to figure out what's wrong and get an answer to them. So this is a big part of why we retain so many of our clients for such a long period of time. Um, and the other thing I wanted to say too, I guess it goes back to what I mentioned earlier about when I was younger, I thought that what you know is more important than who you know. And when you start your business, then you kind of realize that it is who you know is probably more important than what you know because you need people to make introductions for you, right? You need to, in order to get introduced to a prospect or whatever, right? So when I started my own company, Keith, I was going to a ton of networking events. I mean, 2 or 3 times a week, I was going to a different networking event, whether it's a chamber event, an event that's being sponsored or hosted by some type of industry association, or maybe another company that's hosting an event for their clients or prospects, and they're like other accounting firms or banks or whatever. I networked with anybody that I could had a chance to talk to that would talk to me.
Yeah, absolutely.
You know, luckily they took me seriously, and you know that made all the difference.
Now, do you guys service? I know you're in the government contracting arena, but you also do like B2B. So, do you guys service or do you do merchant services for small businesses, or is it usually just large government contracting type groups? Like, who's your
So yeah, so our target market tends to be the companies that are selling to either the government, and the government pays for a lot of things, especially products. The government pays with purchasing cards, Visa or Mastercard purchasing cards. So for example, the VA, Veterans Administration, they pay for a lot of things with a purchasing card. Department of Defense purchases a lot of IT products, office supplies, that type of stuff with a purchasing card. So we we set up the government contractor to be able to take those purchasing cards and to be able to reduce the fee substantially that they're paying for those transactions. But we focus on these are all, and I should say these are all almost all these transactions are card not present. So it's not like the government official is coming, to our client is not going to the government contractor's office, to like say, here's my credit card, right? It's all what we call card not present. So we specialize more in the card not present arena. Businesses like medical practice, it's going to be more card present
sure?
transactions, right? The patient is coming in, they're paying with the credit card, and you're some online, of course, but a lot of it is going to be card present.
And I've got to ask you, Wade, how are you saving 20 to 30% on these processing fees for your clients? Because every time I use Fortis, so I don't know if you're familiar with Fortis, but every year I look at how much I'm spending on credit card fees and I call them and I'm like, hey guys, my business is growing and I just keep paying you more money. Is there any way I can save, or is there any wholesale? And they, oh, you're already on the wholesale, product. So how
Yeah.
do you save your clients, 20 to 30% where other companies can't do that?
Yeah, so there's a couple of ways, Keith. One is because we specialize a lot in these like government purchasing cards or corporate card transactions and large dollar transactions. So a lot of times these are like $10,000 transactions, sometimes even half a million on a credit card, on a card, on a Visa card or Mastercard. So there are special rates to access for purchasing cards that are very large transactions. And it's called level 3 data, where you have to send a lot more information about the transaction. You actually have to send line item information about the transaction. It's like a replication of the invoice details that you're sending back to Visa and MasterCard. And this like reduces the fee substantially. So that's why a lot of our work is IT related also, because we have to make sure all this data gets sent in data packages that are configured properly so that Visa and MasterCard can take that data and then give a lower rate to the government contractor in this case. So it gets to be a little bit of it's more than just, hey, I'm giving you the wholesale rate. It's you have to make sure that they're set up properly from an IT perspective to be able to send all this data to Visa and MasterCard appropriately.
And so that level 3 interchange, I've never heard of that. Is that like a specific, niche area that can you explain more about what that is?
Yeah, so it's a special niche area. It only applies to like purchasing cards or corporate cards. So typically a patient that comes into your office, for example, to integrative chiropractic, they're not going to be paying, they should not be paying with a purchasing card or a corporate card, because then they should be losing their job probably. So,
I'll take 500,000 if they want to pay,
right,
whatever.
right. So like integrative chiropractic, restaurant, like a main street retail store would not qualify for this type of rate because they're not accepting, their customers are not purchasing card holders or corporate card holders. So yes, it is very much a niche, as you said.
And I love that you touched on customer service. I feel like it's been huge. In my business, I'm always training my staff because I feel like that's what, especially since COVID, and I'd love to hear your input on, if you've seen any changes since COVID. But I've been really harping on with my staff on customer service because that's how we've been able to separate ourselves
Hmm.
since the pandemic. With your single point of contact style, business model. is that a challenge for you when you do have so many clients and you only have so many staff? Or has that been able to, have you been, as your company's grown, have you been able to
Yeah.
handle that demand from your clients?
Yeah, so actually it's been pretty manageable to handle. And there's two reasons. Number one is because once we get a client kind of set up and they're going, then the customer service requirement kind of drops off quite substantially. So maybe they're calling us once a quarter or something with a question, or something does come up, like there's a chargeback that happens. So then we have to like help them out with that. But but generally the customer service requirement does fall down over time. They're not calling all the time as frequently. The other element, Keith, is because we're a virtual, like remote, and our clients are all over the U.S., so they don't expect that they have somebody there locally for them. They know we're an email or a call away. And so I have a lot of people. I have about 5 staff people there that are in Atlanta, for example. Atlanta has a lot of payments companies. So I've hired people from other payment companies that have a lot of experience in payments, and they're mainly in Atlanta, where Atlanta is a big hub for people that are in this industry. So I don't have to like limit myself to hiring people that are here locally.
Great. And Wade, I'd like you to touch on you like to speak on leadership for entrepreneurs and small to medium businesses, how to win and be a category of one. How did you get into that, and why is that your favorite thing to talk about?
Yeah, so I've just kind of over time I've wanted to. It's become more of a passion for me to like kind of share what it is I've learned over the years, and to be able to share that experience with others. So, for example, like the what you had mentioned about one of the talks I do on leadership is how to win by being a category of one. So I have this post-it note here that's been on my monitor for like probably about 3 years or more, probably 5 years, but it says like not competing, like, and there's a triangle there. So it's always been there. Like, it's been like a constant question for me, like, how do I succeed without competing? Because I don't really want to compete. I want to have a business where I'm not competing with other people, you know? So that's kind of always been the thing, like how do I not compete? How do I be a category of one? So that I've kind of developed that, I guess, kind of the answer for it, or certainly like some answers for that. And I've developed a talk around that. And one example of, how do you not compete is, you had mentioned it, like focusing on niche markets. I mean, as a small and medium sized business, or as an entrepreneur, you have to be, you can't like try to go after every possible customer out there, right? You have to like identify what is your main strength, and then focus on marketing that element. And that's part of like kind of not competing, is it's helping you differentiate yourself from everybody else. And so one of the ways of doing that is the culture. And I'm curious what kind of culture that you've developed at Integrative Chiropractic. But it's taken me a long time to develop a culture that's really well defined. But over the last 2 years, and I guess I'm not very smart because it's taken me so long to do that, but over the last 2 or 3 years, I've developed a really well defined culture in the organization. And we talk about it every week on what we call a culture call within the organization. And it's really helped to make it very clear for people what it is, why it is that we're different. And part of the culture, I'll tell you a couple of the elements, but I like to tell people that the culture, it's not just about like what it is you do here at the company, but you should be able to apply these elements like in your personal life, like if you're
Mm,
raising kids or whatever. So like, I'll give you a couple examples. We have 12 culture elements, Keith. One of them, I'll give a couple of them just so that it's not so time consuming. But like, for example, one of them is like, be more prepared than anybody else. For that, I say like, just make sure you're preparing an agenda that you're sharing with the other person you're going to meet with in advance. And like, that's how you're going to be more prepared than anybody else. I mean, be a subject matter expert. Another one is like, in order to innovate, like act like a kindergartner. So if you think about how kindergartners act when they do things, they don't, Keith, they don't come up with plans. They don't ask questions. They actually don't collaborate. There's no like deliberate collaboration, and they don't ask questions. So everything that they actually teach you in school, they're not doing it. They're doing the exact opposite. So what do kindergartners do? They just start doing. They just start like you tell them
Creating.
build a tower as tall as possible with this is in one of the in a particular book called Culture Code. Actually, you tell them build a tower that out of dry spaghetti and a marshmallow and build it as tall as possible. And the kindergartners will just start, just start working together without talking, and they're figuring things out along the way. They're making mistakes, but because of this culture, we also it's also accepted that you're making mistakes along the way, that you're failing along the way, because this is the only way that you're actually learning. The opposite to that is you get a committee of people together and you figure out, well, all of this dry spaghetti and marshmallow, how are we going to let's analyze how we're going to build the tallest tower with these materials, and they'll spend like half an hour to an hour figuring out, analyzing it. But really the best way to find the best solution is to just start doing. So anyway, I'm kind of getting long-winded here, but that's one of our culture elements is if you want to innovate, you have to just act like a kindergartner, which means you just start doing things and you don't analyze anything, you don't look at data, you don't ask questions, you just start doing things. And that's how innovation occurs.
Absolutely love that, Wade. And you're not being long-winded at all. I would love to learn all 12 of them. But have you ever heard or ever had your staff do like a working genius survey? Do you know, have you ever heard of working genius?
Yeah, so I'm so glad you mentioned that because we're doing the Working Genius right now. We're right in the middle of
Oh my
that.
gosh.
So this is what's the author's name? Lencioni, right? Working
Correct.
Genius. Yes.
Correct. So we're hiring right now. We're hiring another doctor in addition to another staff member. And I tell all, like my wife, thank God, she's definitely the brains of the operation, I'm sure, as you can tell. And she was the one who put me on to Working Genius because you're absolutely right. For people to create something to be innovative, they have to think like a kindergartner. And that's because they're so creative. They're not thinking about the system and the process and the step one, step two, steps two. They're just being creative, right?
Right.
And
Right.
that's the magic of being a kid and having just that ability to create and to dream and to make those things. So in the Working Genius, I'm sure, as you know, those are what we call inventors. I think there's competencies, there's things that you really fill you up and motivate you, and then there's two competencies that really drain you. So
Right.
it's it's inventor, tenacity, galvanizing, wonder. I forget the other ones, but I thrive off of that because and you asked me about the culture in my office. I have every single staff before I even hire them. And I have them fill out a Working Genius survey because I want to
Okay.
see how we're a much smaller company than yours. So because we're so intimate and we're so small, I want to make sure all my staff have different working geniuses. So together as a whole, I
Yes.
can have one staff member that's more of an inventor and is
Mhm.
going to, or more of a wonderer that's going to think of a cool idea. But then we need somebody who has the tenacity. Those are the taskers that will get it done.
The
And then
finishers.
the
Yes.
finishers, right? And then you have the enablers are the ones that support your team, whatever they don't come up with the idea, but they'll support you
Yes.
once. And then you need the galvanizer's like, all right, hip hip hooray guys, let's get
Right.
it done.
Yep.
So
Yep.
I'm glad you brought that up because Working Genius has been a total blessing in our practice for sure.
What are your two geniuses?
I'm a tasker. I have a very, I think tenacity is definitely my first one. So I love having a list and just knocking off the things to do, a to-do list. I would have to look, Wade. That's a good question.
Yeah.
I know that right now I need an inventor. I don't have an inventor on my staff, and an
Okay.
inventor is very important to me because I create that's like one of my least that's what drains me. Like I'm not even though I'm very entrepreneurial, I almost go to my wife for the inventions. Like she'll think of the
Wow.
idea. She's definitely the visionary and I'm the integrator. So like she thinks up of
Okay.
the great idea and I make it
Yeah.
happen.
Yeah.
So I'm
Yeah.
definitely
Yeah.
more of a tenacity. I'm definitely an enabler.
Enabler and tenacity. Okay. Yeah. Yeah.
But
Okay.
what I've found is like I've got one staff she's definitely more wonder and she's definitely more creative. So whenever we have a new marketing agenda that we want to do, or say it's just even a marketing event and we need to make flyers or we need to make something, like I'm okay, this is I delegate that to that staff person because they have
Got it.
that really fills them up. It also helps prevent my staff from getting burnt out, because if you have somebody who's an inventor but you're tasking them with all these things to do, that's going to drain their motivation, and they're not going to be excited about doing their job. So I really try to delegate tasks in a way that feeds their motivation. So if they get motivated by getting a to-do list done, or they get motivated by galvanizing the entire staff, I'm going to delegate appropriately so that when they come to work, they're more excited to do X, Y, and Z. We always have things at our job that we don't like to do, but if I can fill you up with more things that motivate you and more things that get you excited, obviously you're going to enjoy your job more.
Right. Okay.
So the working genius has been very helpful in our businesses for sure.
So you're a galvanizer also. Yeah.
Well,
No?
so you know what it is? Discernment. Discernment's another big
Discernment.
one, because discernment is somebody who decides whether the idea is a good one to pursue, correct?
Yes.
Like they have that discernment. But I probably am a little bit of discernment, might be my middle two letters,
Okay.
but definitely invention and wonder, I think, are my least. Like
Yeah.
I'm not a good at creating,
Okay.
something new. So I go to my staff or my wife for those types of things.
Okay.
Her highest one is discernment. Anytime I have a new idea, or if my staff has a new idea, I go to my wife and she goes, "That's a great idea, do it." And then I get it done. Or she says, "That's a horrible idea, don't do it." So I try to leverage the resources I have around me depending on their, competencies and strengths.
Okay.
How about you, Wade? What are you?
Well, I just looked at it last night. Funny, because we're in the middle of it. I'm discernment and enabler
Okay,
are my
there you go.
strengths, and galvanize is my frustration.
Yeah,
But interestingly, we did this for the team also, and we don't have anybody that's a galvanizer. Yeah.
so you got to find one.
And I was thinking about this today actually. The implications of this, Keith, is that to me, organizer is also has to be somebody that's good at delegating. So somebody that delegates is a good delegator. I think they have to be a good galvanizer because, like, like let's say if I delegate something to you or you delegate something to me, right? You got to also like kind of motivate me to be on board with it, right? Kind of goes hand in hand. And because we don't have any galvanizers, it also coincides with us not having natural like delegators. We're very strong at enabling and tenacity.
Yeah.
So
And
it's like,
what
yeah,
I've found about people that are enablers, they also tend, not everybody, but they also tend to just want to get it done themselves. So they might
yes,
not
yes,
be
exactly.
willing to let go of control and let somebody
Yes,
else do it. And
yes,
so you've got to be, like my patient concierge position, it's definitely our most complex position, but I tell my staff all the time, you've got to delegate. But they don't like to delegate because they
uh-huh.
want to just get it done themselves, because I'm going to do
Yes,
it better than
yes,
the other person.
yes.
So that's what I've
So
found.
that helps you understand it's a frustration for them, right?
Correct. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I've just pulled mine up. I'm an enabler and a E and T, enabler and tenacity are those are the things that fill me up.
Okay. Yeah.
Galvanizing and discernment are my competencies, and wonder and invention are the things that drain me.
Mhm. Okay.
So,
Interesting.
um,
Okay. Cool.
yeah, but well, you've obviously had a very, very expansive career. I'd love to talk more about your community involvement, Wade, because I know that you're big with obviously how we met was Loudon Education Foundation, in addition to the other, things that you do within the community. So kind of touch on that. How did you get involved with Loudon Education Foundation, and what inspired you to start that up?
Yeah. So with Loudon Education Foundation, I've been a trustee for 20 years, actually a long time. As you mentioned, I was past president of the board for a period of time. But I've always been passionate about education, in particular, like public school education. My dad was public middle school teacher in Los Angeles for his career. But I do believe that like education, public education is like the great equalizer in society, and it gives the opportunity for really anybody to, regardless of your economic means or whatever, to rise up and to rise up to whatever potential you want to eventually become. So that's why I've always been passionate about it, and that's why I joined the Loudoun Education Foundation 20 years ago as a trustee. And I'm really proud of what the foundation has done. I mean, back in the day, it was not many people knew about us. All we did was a few like teacher grants, like classroom grants every year, where if a teacher needed $500 or $1,000 to do some project in the classroom, that they would write a grant to us, and we would fund that. And $500 to $1,000, it's a lot of money for a teacher, and they don't get the budget from the school system to do that, and obviously it's a little much to ask for them to take it out of their own pocket. But this is so significant because when a teacher has a great idea, we all know that many people, when they get older, they say, Mrs. So and so was the most influential person in my life, or Mr. So and so, who was my teacher, had the greatest impact on what direction I later on took. So we know that these teachers have an incredible influence on the direction of the youth and the students. And so we want to empower the teachers to be able to have the greatest impact. And so that's why the Loudoun Education Foundation has been so great. But over time, we've gotten to have more influence. Like, we do a lot of things with workforce development and with working with the business leaders in the community. So, for example, 2017 or so, 2017, 2018, we started a program to bring computer science learning into the elementary schools. We started with 4 elementary schools, and we worked with Loudoun County Public Schools to do this. And we reached out to um, the business community. We got Uninet, Community Foundation of Northern Virginia, and another charitable foundation, Chin Family Foundation, to pony up $25,000 to start up this pilot program for computer science immersion in the elementary school. And if you want to create something at the grassroots, you got to start at very early on, like elementary school, middle school, right? Because it's too late if you start to educate kids at high school level about something that is going to be meaningful for them. And this eventually led to Loudoun County Public Schools getting a $2.4 million grant from Go Virginia that allowed this computer immersion to go across the entire district for all schools. So what started as like 4 schools, elementary school, eventually grew up to the entire district, all the middle schools, and actually all the high schools. We would have liked it to have gone to all the elementary schools, but it ended up just being for the middle schools and high schools. But it these are the kind of things that Loudoun Education Foundation has been able to impact in a huge way. And Loudoun County was the first school to have this computer immersion in an elementary and middle school in the entire state of Virginia. So these are the kind of innovations that really have excited me about what we've done. And then, to raise money, we also do a golf tournament. Uh, we actually have the most successful local charity golf tournament of any other local organization here in Loudoun County. We raise over $150,000. Integrative chiropractic is always part of this. You guys also bring out your tent and do massages for the golfers. And this year, Integrative Chiropractic actually won the tournament. So congratulations, and thank you for all of the years that you've been participating and supporting the Loudoun Education Foundation. The other thing that we do is this Fueled program, what's called Fueled, which is used to be called Backpack Coalition. So the money that you all help raise goes towards doing 13,000 meals a year to economically disadvantaged kids and their families. So this is feeding them over the weekends. The kids that come to school when they're hungry, they don't learn. So we know this for a scientific fact, and this is correcting that situation. So you can see it's very broad, the whole influence of what Loudon Education Foundation has been able to do.
And I have been a big supporter of Loudoun Education Foundation because I think a lot of people don't realize, even though we're in Loudoun County, there are a lot of kids that, not everyone in Loudoun County is wealthy or affluent. There are a lot of populations that, are struggling to get meals. And you're absolutely right. Loudoun Education Foundation does a great job at giving those kids meals, but also, the diversifying the teacher workforce. I love that scholarship as well. Can you talk on that a little bit, Wade?
Yeah, so we also do we do a scholarships for teachers. So somebody that wants to become a teacher and teach in Loudoun County, we give a scholarship to help them with their college degree. And the idea is to bring these students back into Loudoun County so that they would teach here in Loudoun County.
Awesome. And with the golf tournament, I didn't know that that was great. I didn't. So your guys' golf classic at Creighton Farms is the most successful charitable golf tournament in Northern Virginia, or is it
In Loudoun County
in
for
Loudoun County?
for
Okay.
a local charity. I mean, there's charities like Cancer Foundation or whatever that would do a tournament. They're gonna bring a lot more money, or Leukemia Foundation, but they're just a lot bigger and they're national in scope. So when they do it, if they do a golf tournament, they're gonna raise a lot more money than us. But for a local charity, there's nobody else that does as much as we do. Even like Loudon Chamber of Commerce, they don't raise as much money as we do with our event. But how did you win the tournament, Keith? What was your secret
It's
there?
similar to business, Wade. You mentioned earlier that business and personal are sometimes very similar. So I
Mhm.
just try to surround myself with people that are better than me. So we obviously treat a lot of golfers here at the office. I've gotten much more into golf over the past few years, so my golf game has improved, but it was not me. It was definitely my partners in the tournament that helped. But I saw that you were able to meet Jack Nicklaus. Tell me how it was, talking with him and meeting him at the tournament.
Yeah, okay. Well, this is really exciting. I mean, I didn't actually meet Jack at the tournament, but one of the other big sponsors for the Loudon Education Foundation Golf, actually, Mike Huber, he had a chance to have a private dinner with Jack and Barbara Nicholas at their house in Singer Island in Florida. So this was actually at their house, and Mike invited me as one of his seven guests. And so we went down there, spent an evening with them. Very, very gracious, Jack and Barbara. We actually spent 4 hours there with them at their home. And I actually got Jack to talk about one of the first kind of family story that he told all of us together. I read this book before I went down there called Best Seat in the House. So it's a book written by Jack Nicklaus II, so Jack's son. So Jack Nicklaus Jr. wrote this book, and it was all about growing up as the son of, you know, a goat,
Yeah,
goat being greatest of all time, right?
right, right.
GOAT. So he has a lot of stories in there. And one of the stories he talked about was when his sister, Jack and Barbara's only daughter, Nan, was born. So when we were at dinner, Barbara had brought up some story about their dog and this puppy they had, and they gave the puppy to Nan. And so later I said to Barbara, I said, Barbara, that when you mentioned Nan, your daughter, it reminded me of the story that Jack Jr. wrote in the book. And she got all excited. She says, "Oh, yeah." And in particular, the story when you were going into labor with Nan, and you and Jack were at home. This was back in Ohio, and you had Bob Hope and James Gardner over for dinner at the house as you were going into labor. And so she said, and her eyes were just really lit up, and she actually brought the book over to me, and she said, let's have Jack tell that story to everybody, to all of us, to all of us eight. So Jack told the story about when Bob Hope and James Gardner were over at their house, and Barbara says to him, hey, I'm going to have to go to the hospital. I think I'm going into labor. I can take the taxi, and you can just, and Jack's like, no, 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 they got to go home. They got to leave. So anyway, Jack is telling this story, and actually, tears are coming down his eyes because he does get really emotional about family things. When he talks about golf, because we obviously asked him a lot of golf stories. He doesn't get emotional at all. It's very, it's like business for him, right? When he talks about family, it does get teary eyed and stuff. So,
Well, that's awesome. So, having the dinner with them, what are some things you learned maybe about business or about Jack or maybe both that you can tell some of our viewers?
let's see. Well, I did ask him, I said, Jack, do you have a routine? My son asked me to ask him this. What was your routine, like when you're golfing? Like what's kind of they say that every great athlete has some type of routine they go through, right? During the course of a game or a competition. And he said, well, I don't really have a routine. So that kind
Mm,
of surprised me.
mm,
But he is heavily involved in business. He's does golf course design. So he talked about that. He's very involved, and actually Barbara kind of started them off on this with the foundation. So the Miami Children's Hospital is named after the Nicklaus family. So it's called the Nicklaus Children's Hospital in Miami. And so he says like watching a kid survive a terminal illness is much more meaningful than making a four putt.
yeah, yeah, awesome. Well, that sounds like a great experience, and I think that of all the accomplishments you've had over the years in your career, Wade, what kind of advice would you give to possibly an entrepreneur or somebody that wants to start their own business, no matter what type of industry? What have you learned over the years, and what advice could you give?
Well, two things come to mind, Keith. One is this saying that Jim Rohn has. I don't know. Do you know who Jim Rohn is? So Jim Rohn is this. He's actually an old guy. He just died, but he did. This is
Yeah,
Jim Rohn.
yeah.
So he was like a kind of, I wouldn't call him a motivational speaker. He talked about how to be successful. He did a lot of talks, and he would talk about what it is to be successful, whether it's in business or any other endeavor, right? And he would say, work harder on yourself than you do anything else. So work harder on yourself than you do at your job. Work harder on yourself than you do, I mean, anything else. So basically, it kind of comes down to the growth mindset, you're like learning. You don't have the fixed mindset, and this is probably the most important thing because you have to be constantly learning. I belong to a group called Vistage. I've been in it for 20 years. I don't know if you've heard of Vistage. It's a CEO roundtable group, and that's how I've gotten to know, you know, really some very influential people in my circle very well. People like Mike Huber, Christina Boeri, Trey Mock, who owns like the largest insurance agency here in the Mid Atlantic, Chris Marchetti, Dr. Ed Puccio. I don't know if you probably know Dr. Ed Puccio, who's runs the emergency Commonwealth. They run the emergency doctors in Innova Loudon. I've also been involved in like the CEO cabinet, so people like John Wood and Scott Hamburger, Fran Craig from Uninet, Mitra Satyesh, Grace Keenan, Grace Keenan, who started the urgent care facilities here early on. I think they were bought out. But so it's like you have to constantly be learning from other people, constantly learning from like the books you read, like, you know, you're going through this working genius thing. So these are all like learning experiences that so it kind of starts there. And the other thing, Keith, I would say is people think that as a leader, that people are actually following you. And that's been a heavy burden for me to think that like to be a leader, like you have to make people follow you. But actually what I've learned is that people are not actually following the leader. They're following a compelling saga that the leader represents. So the culture is one of them, for example. There could be a compelling saga around the culture. And I do make a compelling saga around the culture. Like if you follow these culture principles, it applies to your personal life as well. So you can make your family better, you can make your whole personal environment better. So don't just do this because of doing it for US transactions or for me. You do it because of doing it for yourself. This is like a compelling saga, right? But but you have to have like these compelling sagas. Like we're very big in the Microsoft space. So, our compelling saga is to be this like little in the David and Goliath story, this
Hmm.
little David, that's this huge success in the Microsoft practice because of like how we interact with customers, how we interact with other Microsoft partners. So, and we're actually doing that. And we have a strategy around like wine and dine strategy with for how we win over the partner community, the Microsoft partner community. But so we have these compelling sagas, and this is what really drives people. It's not me. It's like the compelling. It's it's the sagas that really compel people. People even say like thousands of people came to hear Martin Luther King speak, right, in Washington D.C. But they really weren't there for him. They were there for themselves, right?
Yeah.
So you have to have a compelling saga. And I have one more like little story around this. If you don't have the compelling saga, what happens is people stop following the leader. So for example, we had a President's Club contest last year. So everybody that if the team met their goal, then I would take them on a President's Club trip, and we ended up going to Puerto Rico. So all expenses paid. Take the team out to Puerto Rico for 4 days, and it was just for fun. But they had to reach their goal. So for the entire year before that trip, everybody was like laser focused on like what the goal was, and everybody was cooperating with each other. Nobody was complaining, Keith, about anything. They were just like focused on what it is we need to do to get to Puerto Rico, right? So what happened after we came back from Puerto Rico? The compelling saga was gone. People started to complain about things that I was like, why are you all of a sudden complaining about these things? So you see, they weren't like following me. They were like motivated around a compelling saga, right? Which was get to Puerto Rico and whatever it takes. We're not going to, this is what we're focused on. And so that's the compelling saga. That's just kind of like a little microcosm of the story around compelling saga. I know I like probably spoke too much, but those are the two advices I would have. Leadership, it's not really about you. It's about the compelling saga that you create for those that you are, trying to bring up.
And how do you prevent your compelling saga from, or I guess not prevent it, but is it almost like a mission vision kind of statement, like within the company? Like, here at Integrative Chiropractic, our vision is to really create a community of like minded individuals who are active and healthy and take their health as a priority. Like, that is our vision. Like, our mission every day is to execute and provide great customer service and great care for our patients and things like that.
Mm-hmm.
So, how to create a compelling saga that lasts over years and decades so that you can continually keep people motivated. So, like the Puerto Rico trip, they don't just
Right,
get it
right,
and then they're like, I'm not
right,
motivated anymore.
right. This is a good question. Good question. So one is, I had to create another President's Club. So there's another President's Club contest, but um, you do have to have celebrations along the way. So, like those things that you talked about, the vision and mission for integrative chiropractic, how do people know along the way that they're succeeding in that, in that journey, in that saga that you've created for them? Is that you have to have celebrations along the way that are meaningful for them so that they know that they're on the right journey and they're accomplishing what it is that they're supposed to be doing, and that it is in that sense rewarding for them. But I think tying it to a personal achievement. So again, how we reiterate. I try to reiterate all the time that our culture is something they should follow, not just for the company, but for themselves personally. So I'm trying to give the people something that they can follow that's going to help them for their personal lives as well, for their family, for raising their kids so that their kids will be successful and stuff. So it gives them a framework for that. Hopefully, it's making a difference. I think it is, Keith.
Absolutely, absolutely. And I love that you're combining the professional and the personal because I really preach that a lot with my staff. I'm like, hey, if you're got your business life together,
Mhm.
chances are you should treat it the same. Business and personal are very synchronous, in my
Yes,
opinion.
yes,
If your personal life is a wreck, your business life is going to be a wreck, in my personal opinion. So I always try to tell, and preach to my staff, like, you know, um, if you're doing well at work, transfer those things that you're doing at work into your personal life. Do you see the same
right.
with in your experience?
Yes, yes, I do. I do. I do. Yeah.
All right, Wade. Well, I really appreciate your time. I've been taking lots of notes, so
Okay.
I think, if you'd be willing, 6 months down the road, I'd love to have another podcast with you because we barely scratched the surface, and you're a wealth of information and you're a wealth of knowledge. So I really appreciate your time. Do you have anything coming up that you would like to promote to our viewers? Anything in the near future, whether it's, with your company or with Loudon Education Foundation or anything like that that you would like to promote, have people check out?
Number one, check out .org, usteducation.org. So we host 200 webinars and symposiums a year, and it's continuing education. It's great for professional development for anybody. So if you go to usteducation.org, you'll see all the kinds of different webinars we have. It's free to attend, so it's great professional development. The other thing is, I'm very passionate about workforce development, and which drives the economic prosperity of this region, Loudoun County and the greater Northern Virginia. One of the things that Loudoun Education Foundation is doing, and Nova Community Foundation, which is where I'm on the board as well. So this is for Nova, related to Nova Community Colleges, is they're doing a lot around workforce development, bringing industry and the schools, the students together. And as industry leaders, Keith, yourself, myself, those that are watching the podcast, as an industry leader, you actually can. There's a lot of mentor events where you can actually get together or attend these and interact with students, whether it's Nova Community College or Loudoun County Public Schools or any of the other school districts, where you can interact and actually share your experiences with these students. And it's very meaningful, and you have the ability to really influence the direction that these students will go in the future, because they do lack the exposure to industry leaders like ourselves. And this is a chance where you can very easily make a difference. And it's hugely rewarding when the students just brighten up when they have the opportunity to hear what you have to say.
Oh my gosh, I would love to and that's at Nova Community College. So they have events here that if somebody wanted to
Yes,
speak or talk to the
yes,
students, that's great.
yes. So I will share with you more information about that. And Loudoun County Public Schools is doing similar things as well.
Okay. We will definitely check it out. So everyone who's listening and is interested, we've got usdeducation.org for free webinars and symposiums. And then for any other business leaders or mentors, check out the workforce development at NVCC. Thanks so much for being on, Wade. We really appreciate it.
Thank you, Keith.
Absolutely.